everyone, welcome to our channel, Rebecca, Stu, and the crew. I'm Rebecca. Today we have 7 different spring decor DIY projects. We'll go over the supplies separately. So for number 1, the Dollar Tree supplies we'll need are these little signs that are tags, some carrots, the yarn. We're also going to be using some of these stickers. We'll need some greenery of your choice, also some ribbon. We're going to need Mod Podge, a razor blade, some sandpaper. You'll need some paint and some paintbrushes, some scissors, a pencil. We're also going to need some hot glue. And the Hobby Lobby supplies we're going to need today are some scrapbook paper. This one is called the WP Gingham Gray. The internet supplies is just either a sticker or some clip art that you can type up, just free printable clip art. So let's get crafty. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove this chalkboard off the front of this tag. These were the signs I just had on hand. They have lots of different tag signs that they sell for all different holidays. They have some out right now for Easter. So if you look, I'm sure you'll see them. And all we're going to do is remove the top layer of this paper. So I lift off a little bit of the pieces that were already kind of coming loose, and then I went ahead and got the razor blade that comes in the 4-pack from Dollar Tree, and I just lightly scrape and trim off that top layer of paper. And I do the same for each sign, and all I do is make sure I get that top layer off. I don't really worry about the little bit of paper that's underneath. So then we'll trace the tag on the scrapbook paper with our pencil. And then we're just going to cut around the line that we drew when we traced the tag. So now we're going to start attaching the scrapbook paper. We'll use small amounts of Mod Podge, and we'll cover the very top portion of the sign and make sure you get the edges really well. I usually try to work in smaller sections, and I start at the top and then add a little bit more Mod Podge at the bottom and just keep smoothing it out, making sure you have all of your bubbles out. And then any excess hangover, just fold it towards the back and then lightly sand right on that edge to make a nice crisp line with the scrapbook paper. And this will help so you don't have to try to trim the paper with scissors or a razor blade. It gets it right up to that edge and just fits perfectly when you use the sandpaper. So now for the second tag, I used this light steel gray paint. It's the Apple Barrel brand, but you can use any paint that you like. It doesn't have to be like a Walmart brand or whichever. And it really only took 1 coat of paint to cover the tag. I didn't mind if a little bit of white was showing through. Now taking the free printable clip art from the internet, I'm just going to trim around it with my scissors, and then I will attach it to the tag. So what we're going to do is just mark where the sign is going to go in the corners, add some Mod Podge, and then attach the sign to the front. Now we'll take 4 of these little beads and we're going to paint them dark to look like nail heads. Once we have them painted and they're dry, we're just going to peel that sticky backing off, and we're going to just use hot glue to attach it to all 4 corners of the printable art that you got from the internet. I used a program I had on my computer to add the carrots to this sign that I found from the internet because I didn't want to use exactly what I had found. So there's lots of different ways that you can make it your own just by adding different pieces together. So now we're going to add some small amounts of glue and begin wrapping the carrots in yarn that will coordinate with your paint color and your scrapbook paper. If you like the carrots orange, just go ahead and leave them orange. It's really up to you. Just with the color schemes that I was going for, I thought the carrots would look nicer in the off-white yarn. So once I get to the top, I add a little bit more hot glue and I do a double layer to make sure I don't see any orange. I cut off the excess and just glue the edges down. Now I'm going to make 3 of these 8-inch loops. So they're 8 inches long, and then I just fold them in half and glue the ends together, making 4-inch loops. And I'll make 3 of them. It's about a 2-inch ribbon. And then I made 3 and I just tie them together in the center. Now I did layer a bunch of 4-inch ribbon in an X pattern, and then I just tie that in the center. And then I layered that on top of the wider ribbon, and I tie it together to create a larger layered bow. Now for the tag, in order to line up the pieces, the way I like is I take the holes at the top that the tag goes through to hang it, and I just line those two little holes up, and that gets the tags in the right position. So then to replace the little hanger or the tie, I'm just going to add some white yarn that I used for the carrots and poke that right through the hole at the top. And then I'll just tie it off in a knot and cut off the excess yarn. So then I glue the two carrots together for later. And then I'm just going to take the large bow and start attaching it to the very top of the tag using some hot glue. And then I separate the middle at the bottom and I attach the carrots at an angle with some more hot glue. And then take small bits of greenery and add those to the top of the carrots just to make them look fuller and a little bit more realistic. And I'll take some more greenery that I had left over from an old project from the Dollar Tree, and we're just going to add some hot glue and tuck it underneath of the ribbon on either side of the bow. Then I thought the other tag looked a little plain, so I added this sticker from the internet, and I just made it small and then cut off the corners so that I could tuck it right up next to the other tag, so it looked like it was kind of underneath of it since I was adding this last. And I just used some Mod Podge to attach it to the tag. And I think that helped to fill in that bottom space. So this is what it looks like completely done. So it just goes to show, even though you've got it planned out, sometimes your project can change and you might want to add something last minute, and there's ways to do that. So this is the whole thing from top to bottom. Again, all the pieces were from Dollar Tree except for the scrapbook paper. But you really don't even need to use the scrapbook paper. If you want to use something else, that will work as well. So now for the supplies for our second project, we're going to go over the items we need from the Dollar Tree first. We're going to use one of these small wood crates. We'll also need some foam. It could be floral foam or a pool noodle, some Spanish moss, some farmhouse style pictures, some clothespins, also some twine. We're going to need some paint. I'm using orange, some off-white, and some antiquing wax, a small sponge, and some Mod Podge. We'll need some scissors and hot glue. So let's get crafty. So I saw these little carrots made out of clothespins on Pinterest. They were on a whole bunch of different pages. Too many to cite them all, so I don't really know who started it, but I did get the idea from Pinterest. You just want to remove these springs from the clothespins, and then we're going to glue the flat sides together to make a carrot shape. So we can make a small carrot by just adding two pieces together like this. Make sure your bottoms are lined up. That would be one carrot by itself. If we want to make a 3D carrot that is flat on the back, then we'll make 3 of these pieces. We'll glue them together and layer them. And then if we want to make one carrot that will stand alone by itself, what we'll do is we'll make 4 pieces and we'll glue them together to make a carrot that can stand by itself. So right here, we're going to make one of the 3D carrots by gluing 2 pieces together, and then we'll glue a 3rd piece right to the center, and this will make the 3D carrot with the flat back. If we want to make one that stands, we'll just add another one to the back, just like we're doing this one here on the front. So I'll make a whole bunch of carrots because we'll use quite a few throughout all these projects. So I'm going to make a couple that are orange, some with the 4 pieces, some just single, and some with the 3 pieces. So I made a whole bunch of different ones just to have them all done for the video. So now to paint or stain your wooden carrots, you can use the dark orange paint. You can use the antiquing wax. I did a little bit of both. So I used the orange paint to cover the clothespins. I thought they looked a little too bright orange for me, so I went over it with some watered down antiquing wax. I just went over the orange and then I wiped it off to add just a little bit of age to the color of the carrots. And then some of the carrots, I just used just the antiquing wax. I didn't paint them orange at all. I like that natural look. They're up there in the corner if you can see that. And it's just to give the aged look to the wood or a natural look. So that's what I did. And then I added different colors of stems to each one of the carrots. So for some of the carrots, I used twine to make stems. That was for the orange carrots. For the ones that I made that were brown, just with the antiquing wax, I just used a embroidery thread that was an off-white color. So to make the stems, you just wrap the twine or the yarn around your fingers about 12 times. You'll tie it off to create a loop, and then you'll cut the loop on one side. Now you've got these little tassels here. Take another piece of twine and just wrap it around the bottom to kind of bind them all together, and then attach that little piece of twine with some hot glue to push the end down. And then what you'll want to do is just trim the top portion of the twine just to even up the edges a little bit. You don't want them too long, but you don't want them too short. And so I'll make stems for all the carrots so that all of them will be finished and ready to go for all the different projects we're going to use them in. So for the 3D carrot here, we'll just add some hot glue to the center and then tuck it down inside the middle of the carrot. And then we'll trim it up a little bit more if we need to. These looked a little long on one side, so I did trim them. So these are the 3D carrots that stand up in the orange. For the natural color wood that I stained with the antiquing wax by just brushing it on with the wet sponge. Most of them I made with the flat back, and then I just used that natural color embroidery thread to make the stems. And I just tuck it right into the back, and I use a dowel rod to help me push it down just because it wasn't as firm as the twine, so it was a little bit harder to get in the middle of the back there. And I did make one of these carrots able to stand, so I did the 4 pieces, and we'll add bows to these later to use in the other projects. So then for the single carrots, where I just glued one clothespin together, I actually used these little tiny pieces of greenery I had left over from an old project to add some more realistic looking leaves to the top of the carrots. And those will be for one of the projects we make as well. So now for this second project, we're actually taking the carrots that we made to add to this crate. I'm going to trim the edges with this dark brown paint, and I'll wipe off the excess because I really just wanted a light layer of paint so it almost looked like a weathered stain that had been rubbed off or weathered off over time. So again, I'm just putting a little bit on and then removing most of the paint. I painted those little slat pieces in between so that they were dark. And then I went over the whole entire crate with an off-white colored paint. It still looked a little too bright to me, so then I did go back over it with some antiquing wax and a dry brush. So you want to dry brush a light layer of the antiquing wax all over the mini crate. Then we're going to cut up some foam or a pool noodle to fill the base of the crate. So I'm using my hot glue gun and I have it set on low temp so I won't melt the foam. I'm just going to layer these pool noodles in the very bottom of the crate. Then I have some pool noodle slices. I add a few of the 3D carrots to the pool noodle slices. And this is just to figure out my spacing where I want these carrots to be. Once I figure it out, I glue the 2 carrots in that already have the pool noodles connected to it. And then the other 2 will just go down in the base. I wanted them to look kind of like different layers. So I cut notches with the razor blade into the pool noodle, add some hot glue, and then tuck the end of the carrot down into the foam. So now the carrots are in there. I know they're not going to fall out. I finished stuffing the rest of the box, those open spaces, with more of the foam, and then I'm covering it with the Spanish moss just by adding some hot glue and layering the moss. I keep tucking it in and around all of the carrots so I hide all of that foam. And this way, whenever it gets knocked over, if my cats or kids knock it over by dusting under it or something, I don't have to worry about the carrots falling out, which is why I glued them all in place in the box, even though they will stand by themselves. So just keep layering your moss until you have all of the foam completely covered. And then make sure you do the little handles too, because you'll probably be able to see the pool noodles through this side. So then I took an old picture from one of the Dollar Tree calendars. I just had one I hadn't used yet. So I am just going to cut out one of the small pictures. You can use a picture from the internet again if you like, and just Mod Podge that onto the front, and then cut marks where the slats are for the crate, and then rub in between with your finger or the point of like something sharp like a pencil or something, and just crease those little pieces of paper so it looks like each piece of the sign is on an individual slat. Then I go back over it with some more Mod Podge since I cut through the sign. I wanted to make sure it was attached really well. And then I wanted to add some more detail to the crate to make it a little bit more realistic. So I'm going to take more of these little beads, paint them dark brown, and we'll glue them to the sides of the crate to make them look like nails that are holding it together, that are a little bit aged and weathered by the color of them. So we'll need 6 of the beads for the front and 6 beads for the back. And I'm just going to attach those again with some hot glue once all the paint has dried. And this is our project finished. So now for our next project, which is project number 3, we are going to be going from the Dollar Tree supplies. We'll need this large DIY wood carrot sign. We'll need some wired ribbon, also some burlap, some greenery. We'll need the stickers again, some brown paint, some of the bath sponge. We'll also need a paintbrush, some Mod Podge, and some sandpaper. We're going to use scissors and then a pencil. We will also need some hot glue. And the supplies from Hobby Lobby will be the scrapbook paper. It is called Polka Dot Orange. And then I'll use some celery and moss colored green paint, some antiquing wax, and then the internet supplies or supplies you might have on hand. It's just some free printable clip art. So let's get crafty. So the first thing we're going to do is just lay our DIY sign on top of the scrapbook paper, trace around it with your pencil. And then as you notice, I didn't trace around the top portion because of the leaves. So I'm just going to cut this very edges out, and then I leave like some excess at the top so that I'll be able to get a more precise cut by just taking the scrapbook paper, laying it back down on top of the sign once I have the edges cut out, and then just smooth along that top ridge with your hand to mark where to cut at. And then we'll just cut that excess paper off. So make sure it lines up before you start attaching it, and then just rub on some Mod Podge at the very top. Pay attention to the edges so that you get it glued down really well. As you notice, I don't go all the way down with the Mod Podge just yet. I like to work in small sections. So I do the top portion first, make sure I have it all lined up, and I smooth it out so I don't have any bubbles underneath. Then a little bit more of the Mod Podge and finish gluing down your scrapbook paper. And then if you have any excess, you can use the sandpaper to rub off the edges. Then we're going to use the green paint to paint the greenery at the top of the carrots. I'm using celery green for the larger portion, and then for the trim, I actually added a little bit of the antiquing wax to the green just to darken the paint color up a little bit, and then I painted the darker green along the outside portion. And then we'll let that dry. Then we'll take a small piece of burlap ribbon from Dollar Tree. We'll pull the edges off. So we have these little strands that kind of stick out from each of the 4 sides. And make sure that the burlap's big enough to fit right across the top there. Then we're going to take some Mod Podge and start dabbing it on the burlap to completely soak it in the Mod Podge. Once we have it completely saturated, we lay it on top of the sign and then add a little bit more Mod Podge to make sure that it is well attached. Then you'll want to let this dry. I cheated. I used a hair dryer because I was trying to record and get these all done for you guys this week. So I just go over it with the Mod Podge, and then I dry it with the hair dryer. And then I use the printable clip art. I use this farmer's market sign. I add a little bit of the antiquing wax just to make it not look so bright white. And I actually printed this on some printable sticker paper you can pick up at Walmart, Hobby Lobby, pretty much anywhere. I just wanted to try the sticker paper, so I didn't always have to use Mod Podge to attach the little signs that I print out. So then I'm taking some more of that antiquing wax and a very dry sponge, and I'm just kind of working the edges of the sign. And then I brush kind of like in an arc pattern to create those curved lines you would see like at the sides of a carrot, just to give it more of like a 3D look so it didn't look so flat. So you want to add just a small, very minimal amount. at a time. You can always add more, but you can't take it off once it's on. So less is more, work in small portions with just a tiny little bit of that antiquing wax. And then if you need more, go ahead and get some more and add it to the edges and just keep blending it out until it looks the way you like it. And then once you have that done, you'll go ahead and attach your farmer's market sign, if that's what you're using, to the middle of the burlap. So it is a peelable sticker. Like I said, I did add a little bit of hot glue to the corners to help hold it down, which we'll see here in just a second. So I'm taking those 4 little beads to make nail heads again, and I'm using that as hot glue in the corners with the beads to finish gluing down the little sign I just added. And then I'll add some paint once the glue has dried. And this is just to make them look like the nail heads. It's just a dark brown paint. So this sign's really easy to make. So now we're just going to make a bow. I lay some string down in the middle first, and then I just keep layering portions of the burlap ribbon with some green and brown ribbon pieces in an X pattern. Once I get it pretty full, I take that yarn that I put down first and I just tie it really tight around the middle portion. And I'll use a double knot. And then I'll get some of that dark green ribbon that's in the bow, and I'll actually cut a small piece and we'll use that to wrap around the center of the bow. So we're going to glue it to the very front, and then we'll flip the bow over and we'll cut off the really long pieces, but leave enough that you can finish covering the bow with the piece of ribbon that you have. And we'll just attach that with some hot glue. I left the long pieces of string on the bow. You don't have to, but I actually used it to help attach it to the sign. So I just flip it over and I tie it along the back. And then I'll cut off the excess. I flip it over and I just add some hot glue underneath of the bow. And you'll fluff it up a little bit, make sure it looks the way you like it. And let's add a little bit more detail. We're going to take some greenery and put that on either side of the ribbon. You can use a pencil to help you tuck down the little bit of greenery down into the pieces of the bow. And then we'll take a little bit more greenery with some hot glue and tuck it underneath of the bow as well on either side. And then the very last portion, we're just going to reattach the hanger that it came with. I removed it when I needed to paint the top portion of the sign. So I just pulled it out. It's one of those pieces of twine with the little plastic pieces on the end. So it's really easy to replace. And this is that project all finished. And now we'll go over the supplies for the next project, project number 4. The Dollar Tree supplies we're going to use is one of these metal soda can lids. We'll need the lids from these glass bottles, also some Spanish moss, a small foam rabbit, a small foam Easter egg, one of these small planters, some hot glue, and some scissors. And then we'll need some paint brushes, the little carrots we made, and some greenery. So let's get crafty. So the first thing we're going to do is I had these little lids left over from jars that I had taken them off of when I made some faux looking glass pumpkins around Halloween and Thanksgiving. So I had these sitting around, so I thought I could use these as feet to the bottom of this soda can lid, and then that looks like a tray when I flip it over. So now we're going to take one of those small glass pots and we're going to paint it with some off-white and a little bit of antiquing wax. I had this one already done from an old project, so I painted over it. And then I took one of the foam rabbits and I painted it a really light tan color to match the flower pot. And you'll see all the way around it. So I did paint all the way around. And then also one of the foam Easter eggs, I painted it in a mineral color. I added some little white polka dots to it with a chalk marker. Also, I painted 2 eggs, but I ended up only using 1. So then we're just going to put this all together. We fill the flower pot with some moss and start putting in these carrots that we made earlier into the flower pot. So we'll glue them down once we know where we want them to be. So as you can see, I place them first. And once I figure out that's where I want them to be, then I go back and add some hot glue. And this is what the pot looks like. Then I take a little bit of greenery and tuck it down behind the flower pot. I end up gluing the flower pot down, then the rabbit. And then I'm going to take a handful of Spanish moss, roll it into a tight ball, like pretty tight. And then you want to start forcing it into the palm of your hand using your thumb and just keep working at it. And it'll eventually turn into like a little nest. And then what you'll do is just glue that down to the tray and then glue one of your little eggs to the center of the nest and add a little bit more greenery if you like. This is just a little tray that you can set out on a table. Has a bunch of different elements for spring, and you could leave this out pretty much all the way to May. I think it would make it all the way to Mother's Day. And now we'll go over the supplies for our next project, project number 5, the Dollar Tree supplies. We're going to be using these carrots we made earlier, one of these palette pieces, some brown paint, some white and mineral paint, scissors, hot glue. So let's get crafty. Let's take those brown carrots we made earlier and add just a little bit of color. We're going to add a little bit of ribbon using some dark green pieces. We'll just tie a knot around them to make kind of like an X pattern to make a very, very simple bow. Fluff it up just a tad and then add it to the top of your 3D flat-backed carrot with some hot glue. I'll set that aside for just a few minutes. We painted this palette, the back of it, with a light mineral color, and then the crossbars we're going to paint with a dark brown paint. Once we painted the sides with the dark brown paint, I went ahead and did the edges as well with the dark brown. You can do in between each individual slat, but I didn't think that was necessary. Then we'll just glue the carrot right to the center of the palette, and that's the whole project. Super simple. And now for our next project, the supplies for number 6 from Dollar Tree will be the Spanish moss. We're going to use some of these wood stems, some scissors, hot glue, and again, the carrots we made earlier. So let's get crafty. Take your stems. You're going to just need one piece. And then you're going to roll up some Spanish moss into a tight ball and then flatten it out with your fingers. Then add some hot glue to your wood stem and attach the Spanish moss. Really pack it down, make sure it's going to stay on. You can add more if you need it. And then trim around the edges. If it's too wild there, give it a little bit of a haircut. Then we're going to add a bow to each side of this carrot. This is going to be one of the 3D carrots with the 4 pieces so that it will stand. Add some hot glue to the very bottom and then just hold it upright on top of the Spanish moss until your glue dries. I wanted this little piece to be like something you could add to one of the tiered trays or just add to like a village or something like that. I thought it was a cute little piece. So now for the supplies for number 7, our last project, we'll use one of these Dollar Tree chalkboards, a foam rabbit. We're going to use again the brown carrots, some of the paint brushes, and a chalk marker. So let's get crafty. We're just going to go ahead and paint the trim with some paint. And then you can make it look a little bit aged with some antiquing wax if you like. Once the paint's dry, just take your flat-backed brown carrot we've added a bow to and glue that to the center, like the center of the carrot to the edge of the chalkboard there in the corner, as you can see here. And then I decided to add one of the little foam rabbits. So I took some darker brown paint this time and I painted the whole entire rabbit. Once it was dry, I went back in with a little bit of a lighter color and just added a little bit of kind of fluff to him. And I made his tail white. Kind of like an off-white. It wasn't really like a bright white. I just wanted it to stand out a tiny little bit. So once the glue's all dried, you'll want to make sure your hot glue is on the low temperature so that you can glue it to the other side of your chalkboard without melting it. So then I just add that to the opposite corner from the carrot with some hot glue. And then I'm going to take a chalk marker and write on the chalkboard. So I took a small piece of like a craft stick that I could use as a ruler. That way I could get the lines nice and straight while I was writing the words. So I just wrote Happy Easter with the chalk marker. And then I ended up drawing some like squiggly lines underneath of it just to kind of make it decorative and dress it up. And I kind of colored in the little scroll marks a little bit and added some polka dots to the corners. And that's it for the last project. So there's lots of different things. You could use them for all of spring here. We've got our tags, also the mini crate with the carrots growing. We've got our farmer's market large carrot here for the door. Also our small miniature tray, the wood palette sign, and then our little 3D carrot and the chalkboard sign. So I hope you guys enjoyed these crafts with me. I know this video went up late. I didn't realize it was going to take me so long to edit all the different pieces. I do try to post the DIY videos on Thursdays or as close to it as possible. And then every Friday I post what's new at the Dollar Tree. And I go to 5 different stores in DFW and combined all the pictures into one video each week. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please check back and watch some of our other videos. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And here are some of those videos from our channel that you might also enjoy. Have a great day, everyone.